Thanks, and sorry from my end for the little hitch there, and welcome everyone that's joining. I can see people joining, so welcome aboard, and welcome to my studio. It's a space studio in London, and I'm going to, I think, just walk around the studio a little bit. I can flip it round so that you get to see. There's a work in progress on the easel. That's an obituary painting of Maria Lasnik. You can see that there, and there's the collage I've made up to work from. And I'm just going to sort of point you. There's the door. I'll head over to the door area. I know that on the presentation that Chris put up, he starts with this portrait of my father, deceased, in the mortuary. That was about 20 years ago. And then also in this area, you've got a painting relating to John Lennon's memorial 20 years ago. These are things that are on the presentation that Chris has put up, the portrait of legacy. Here's Princess Margaret. That's the very first obituary I did, really. It's a pencil drawing. And then it kind of went on from there. I'm going to, up here, you've got little old still life paintings. There's an ashtray with 2 cigarette butts. Some other, that's kind of how it started, with still life paintings. And then right over here, we've got what I call my political wall. Hello, Archie, just joined. Here's things that relate to 9/11. That was my graduation day from City and Guilds of London Art School. And then other things following on from that, the Iraq War and so forth. And then over here, we've got some obituary paintings, Nelson Mandela, Maya Angelou, recent ones that are still politically based. We've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg there, and George Floyd, John Lewis. So that's part of my practice. And then this whole wall over here, which is more recent, really, and more current, there's Basquiat, Jan van Eyck down there. There's a bunch of New York artists, Motherwell, Pollock, Rothko, Sol LeWitt, Artemisia Gentileschi. So these are the things that I've been really working on in quite a dominant sort of way over the last few years, really up to about 4 years. And these ones, this whole wall here, are all based on artists' self-portraits that I've remade and turned them into obituaries. And these are a lot of the things that you'll see in the presentations online. So especially the portrait of legacy that Chris has put up on the Townsend Gallery. There's also a virtual show with Charlie Smith Gallery at the moment, which has got some obituaries and some political works. But you'll see this is a wall of sort of recent works. There's one of my old teachers, Ewan Uglow, in his self-portrait. One of the more recent ones I've just been working on here is Chardin, his self-portrait fairly late in life. Got Gwen John there. And various others. Stephen Korn, Francis Bacon there. Lucien Freud, I know he's on the presentation as well on Townsend site.
Hugh, do you want to talk a little bit? Do you want to talk a little bit about how your engagement with the newspapers in your studio practice after the death of your father and after the John Lennon painting? How it was that after that, when you were reading The Guardian, how that kind of propelled this project or informed it in a new and deeper way? I think that everyone might find that a bit interesting.
That's back to me again. So that sort of relates over here to this wall. Like I was studying at City and Guilds of London Art School on my master's, and that my actual graduation day was 9/11, and
you saying you want me to go?
I'd already started painting from newspapers as part of still life.
You want me to go there imminently?
And so it went straight into very politically based work as a result of 9/11 happening and me graduating that day and painting images with twin towers and so forth. And then the ensuing war on terror and the Iraq war, Afghani war, and so forth. So I'd always read the newspapers and kept up, and there's always like newspaper clippings in my studio, but essentially while I was on my MA, I started painting from the newspaper clippings as well as other objects. So that's kind of how it started. Within that, I started focusing more on obituaries. Like I said, that Princess Margaret thing was the first one, the drawing.
Not really.
Some of these works over here, these are older works from like 20 years ago. There's some quite large paintings there. So I tried originally to work on a larger scale. It didn't really work because the thing about these ones is they're all trompe-l'oeil. They have an element of trompe-l'oeil, so they're illusionistic. They look like an actual newspaper clipping stuck on a canvas. So, and even representing the wall, like the white paint on the canvas there. So I sort of abandoned the larger scale and worked on this kind of small scale. Originally, they were done as they appeared. So older obituaries, like up there, if you can see up there, we've got somewhere up there. There we are, Glenn Ford. So that's as they appeared in The Guardian. That's before I started then making them up, like fictitious. All these things. Tucker's quite recent. That's just happened. Some of these are recent, but a lot of them are made up in the format of an obituary. So I've been working with both those things. Like, if I flip this around again, you can see this is my working table here. So I work with this cutting mat here, and a knife, and a ruler, and just chop up. So this is going to be sort of coming along soon as Soutine self-portrait there. So they start like that, and then there's a recent collage made up for Maria Lasnik, and then there's the painting. So I've started to answer your question, and then I've gone off in a slightly different direction there.
That's okay. I have a different question or a different observation to share with everyone that of course you're familiar with regarding your work. But what becomes kind of interesting when you mention trompe-l'oeil, what becomes interesting is the whole history of trompe-l'oeil painting. But with these obituary works, it starts becoming conflated with still life, as you mentioned, but also portraiture. And I just want to point out that it's kind of the convergence of these different histories and trajectories within painting that come together in Hugh's work, I think, so beautifully, and makes them really rich and thoughtful. And then that added innovation that began in about 2016, I believe, with Hugh, I believe it was Lucian Freud, when it was the first time that Hugh had decided to swap out the actual image that was in the obituary for one of the artist's self-portraits. So again, connecting with one of painting and art history's rich traditions of artists painting themselves or self-portraits becomes another element. And Hugh, I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about your experience when you essentially work to embody the artist when you're doing those particular works. If you want to share with the viewers today.
I was just sitting here before this started looking at these people, these artists that are behind my head. We've got Blaine de Kooning there and William Crozier. A lot of these people I didn't personally know. Some of them I did personally know, and some of them I felt quite close to. It varies in degree, but I try and sort of inhabit and embody the artist that I'm working with in some way. And obviously, I'm remaking their self-portraits, so I have to kind of get inside their own head and how they portrayed themselves and how they saw themselves and how the image of themselves worked within the overall oeuvre of the work. So, I mean, like I said, like Ewan Uglow here, wherever he is, he was one of my teachers at Chelsea, so I knew him quite well. But that's an unusual example, really. Leon Kossoff I met just before he died. He was quite a reclusive artist, but I met him at his show, which was a retrospective show here in London, and he showed up in his wheelchair, and it was just a matter of, I think, weeks before he died, so that was quite an honor. But those cases are quite unusual. With most of these people, I didn't know them or I didn't meet them. But, say somebody like Rembrandt there, he's been part of my awareness of art most of my life. You think of art, you think of artists, Rembrandt comes up pretty quickly. He's also a person that made so many self-portraits that we're all very, very, very familiar with. So in his case, also that particular painting is here in London in the National Gallery. So I've spent many hours standing in front of that painting. So they're, in different ways and in different degrees. Obviously, if I can stand in front of the actual painting like that, Gwen John is also here in London, as is the Stanley Spencer there. That really, really helps if I can actually be there with the painting prior to then embarking on my copy or my version. Actually, David Medall has just appeared there. He's a very recent painting. He was another of my teachers at Chelsea Art School, recently deceased. So when I was painting him, I could immediately hear his voice in my head. Oh, Hugh, and I knew him off and on from that time till now. So over a more than 30-year period, he would pop up from time to time here in London, in New York, in San Francisco. I would see him, and meet him in various locations, different art shows. He was quite a maverick and a very, easily remembered character, very strong character. So that they do vary in that way. And these paintings take a couple of weeks or more, 3 weeks to make. Like you mentioned, the Lucian Freud painting. I'm just going to flip that round again. That painting, actually, that's a second version of, like quite a few of these, I've done more than one. I've done more than one Francis Bacon, more than one Lucian Freud, but they take quite a long time. There's a guy, Tom Lubbock, there, who I know you've also featured in the presentation that you put together. He was somebody that I knew personally. They are different when they're people that I actually personally knew, that were either my teachers or Tom Lubbock was a colleague teaching at City and Guilds where I currently teach. He was working in the art history department. So there's a very different feeling then. Actually, I can get quite emotionally churned up talking about Tom Lubbock because his story was quite tragic, really, quite sad. But others, they're more exuberant, like David Medalla. If I think of him, it's an exuberant thought. He was a very funny character. And so when I bring him to mind, I immediately have a smile for David. Anyway, I don't know if that long-windedly answers your question. Maybe it does.
It does, and we have a question from one of our followers that I would love to ask you at this time. That's kind of the other side of the coin to what you're talking about when you have a fondness and a personal connection or personal relationships with some of these artists and art world figures such as critics. So that the question is, are there historical figures from the past that are prominent, yet you choose to not paint them? And if so, can you elaborate on that?
Well, obviously, the ones I have painted are in the minority. So most of the people, historical characters, whether in the world of art or in the world of politics or in the world of celebrity or whatever, there are obituaries in the newspapers every day, and the ones that I actually get to paint are very much in the minority. So I have to have a very good reason to paint them, to want to paint them, whether it's a personal reason and what I think of as an objective reason, like they're very important in the history of art, like say Rembrandt or one of these other people. There are people in history that I choose not to paint for whatever reason. They don't interest me enough. They're not visually interesting enough or engaging enough. There are a lot of artists in history that don't really mean much to me. All these ones behind my head here, for one reason or another, they've meant a lot to me. Either the image, the work they made, what they stood for, how they made work, their personal history, their story. They're all different reasons that I've come to paint them. But like I say, they're very much in the minority. The majority of the artists of history, I'll never get around to painting them. I mean, I showed you Soutine on the cutting board there. How come I've only just got round to painting him? It's taken me 4 years, 5 years to get round to him.
Well,
You know, I
certainly.
haven't even touched on Caravaggio. I haven't touched on Raphael. I mean, it's impossible. It's an impossible task. I just keep going.
Well, it is an impossible task, and I find it interesting because you are so prolific. In a sense, one can get caught up in viewing all the work that you've done. So therefore, there isn't necessarily an a natural opportunity to start thinking about what's not there until one is disengaged because of the volumes, and certainly it wouldn't be your job to kind of document the Western canon of art. That would just be impossible, as you point out. So we have another question from one of our followers, and so this is going to be a little bit of a shifting of gears, but related insofar as in pop culture. So, for example, you did the beautiful painting of Elizabeth Taylor. So, shifting the question from art history and those who you choose to make paintings of, do you want to talk about some of the highlights from the pop culture aspect
Yeah,
of
I
your?
mean, there's. I used to do a lot more of those. The art history figures are very much more recent. So when I started doing obituaries, I was painting people as they appeared in the newspapers. I remember painting Bob Hope, Paul Newman, like you say, Liz Taylor, um, a lot of people that related to film. I think film is an art form that is of particular interest to me, and I know in popular culture, movie stars are very prominent, put it that way, and also they look fantastic often. So like that Liz Taylor was a great, lovely thing to paint. You know, she just looked fantastic, and it was a great pleasure to paint that image of her. There's a couple up on the wall here. I mean, Adam West. You see, when I was a child, I watched all those Batman shows with Adam West, and so it's a very big part of my childhood. We've got Robin Williams there. I lived in California, and he was a, sort of a local celebrity up in Northern California. Muhammad Ali meant a lot to me as a kid as well. He was a very, very special guy. I mean, I follow sport a lot, you know, and I have done all my life since I was a kid. And I remember again as a kid watching Muhammad Ali boxing, but also I remember him being interviewed and talking about things in a way that I'd never heard before. I mean, very funny things that he would say, but politically very pertinent. The fact that he went to jail rather than join up to go and fight the Viet Cong. You know, there's Nelson Mandela. I remember him walking free. You know, that day it was live on TV when he came out of the jail, having spent so much of his life incarcerated for his beliefs. You know, so these are people that meant something to me and meant a lot in popular culture, like you're saying. There's very few here. I mean, also, I don't know, it was quite a number of years ago now, but I had a show in Los Angeles at Gosford Gallery, and it was all made up. It was called The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful, which was a film reference, and it was mostly made up of celebrities, movie celebrities, because it was in Hollywood. So, you know, that's part of my life. It's personal, isn't it? It's personal and it's transpersonal. And, you know, Mercer Cunningham there from the world of dance and choreography. Something about his life was very significant, I felt, and very important. So there are different reasons for painting people. And, you know, again, it was fantastic painting that image of him because it just looked such a great image. And it was very pleasurable. It has to be like that because, like I say, I've spent a lot of time with these people and the image of them. And unless it's something I really want to paint, it's not going to work. You know? And sometimes it doesn't work. They don't always all
Well,
work.
absolutely. And I'm going to use this as a segue to wind down a little bit today's studio visit and Q&A. But I do want to tell all of our viewers, apart from thanking them, that some of the other questions that we've received, we'll be posting those answers on Townsend Instagram, so you can go there for some of those questions. The content of which we've kind of touched on today, but we'll answer them more explicitly. But as a way to wind down, my question to you is based on everything that you're talking about today. What is it like to be in your studio when you look all around at all of these figures that are so important to you, and have been for so many decades? Is there a particular sensation that washes over you from time to time?
Well, it's nice to be surrounded by these people, especially the artists, but not just the artists. But I feel a sense of their presence, or I don't know, I feel I'm in a privileged position having a studio at all and being able to work and spend so much time here. And I spend so much time here surrounded by these people. Obviously, a lot of paintings have gone, have left the studio. Sometimes it's quite sort of heart-wrenching when they go. They get sold and they go off to collections here and there and wherever. But at the same time, I'm very glad about that as well. I like the fact that a number of my paintings are in New York or in Los Angeles or wherever they are around the world. You know, that's a nice feeling as well. But I love walking in here, of course, every day. And usually I walk in and somebody's on the studio, on the easel here, and Maria Lasnit currently. So I might walk in and say, "Morning, Maria," and she's sitting there waiting for me, you know. So there's a sense of these people that I'm working with being present to some degree, at least in my imagination.
Well, it does become, it becomes a beautiful tribute in so many ways, and to have it expressed all over your walls and throughout the collections of people throughout the world is really a very lovely sentiment and gesture and offering on your part. I think that that'll wrap it up. I'll turn it over to Hugh for any closing thoughts. And actually, before I do that, as I mentioned, I'll be responding to some of those other questions that have been touched on, but you can find those answers on the Townsend Instagram. But also feel free, if to ask any further questions, you can DM Townsend or drop your question in a comment on one of our posts, and we'll be happy to answer it. So any last thoughts from you, Hugh?
I'd like to thank anyone that's out there that's been listening or watching. Thank you for showing up in my studio. It's a strange thing. Didn't quite know what to make of it. You're sort of here and you're not here at all. But just thanks to everybody, and I hope you're enjoying your day wherever you are, and you know, good luck for your future. And you know, thanks very much for being here. Thanks, obviously, especially to Chris for facilitating this and putting on the beautiful presentation on the Townsend website. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you to everyone. We'll keep this conversation going in various forms.
Please do.
And we'll see you all soon again. Thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.